A very warm welcome to the 36th Documentary Film Festival in Munich at home. We are here at the DOK.forum, which is the industry platform of the DOK.fest. And this is the first part of the series of events we call Rearranging Reality. It's about post-production in documentary films. And today we're kicking this off. There will be more talks and panels, and there will be Q&As with editors of nominated films, because something very important is here happening. The DOK Edit Award will be granted to one of those 3 nominated films, and we'll have Q&As with the jury and editors. All this will take place in the next days, like today, we're kicking it off, and tomorrow, and then from Monday to Thursday, we'll have all those meetings. And I hope you find a way to participate and be part of it, because I think this is a very important part, and shifting our focus on this part of documentary filmmaking is a wonderful and important thing. So today I'm really happy to have some of the guys on board who made this possible. We are partnering with Adobe to make this possible, and today we have some special guests, and those are Patrick Palmer, and he's principal product manager. I'm reading it to not make any mistakes. Victoria Nece, and she is product manager for motion graphics and visual effects, and also Anton Knoblach, and he is product marketing manager video for Central Europe. So Adobe heavyweights here in the panel, and those are, of course, fancy job titles, but I would be interested what's behind it, and what's your background and filmmaking. Probably, Patrick, would you start to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks. And thanks for having us. It's great to be part of this festival. What is the fancy job title all about? Well, generally speaking, product management has so many different meanings today. At Adobe, and specifically for the video products, it is a somewhat old-fashioned meaning to the name. We're really responsible for making sure that the product does what it's supposed to be doing. We're also responsible for making sure that we keep up with industry trends, that we make sure that the product is serving the needs of the audiences that we're working for. And at the end of the day, unfortunately, also a big part of it is to say no to things that just don't fit the broader agenda of the product. Victoria is nodding, because that's actually the hard part. Sometimes we have to say no to great ideas, but if it's basically not serving a wider audience, then we have to make sure that we also don't actually make the product what easily can be referred to as bloatware. If you overdo it, if you put too many buttons in, it becomes harder to use. So our job is largely a balancing act, I would say, from that perspective. I'm not a filmmaker, but that's actually a great opportunity for me to hand it over to Victoria, because she's certainly having better background for this conversation and is the actual star of the conversation, therefore.
Thanks, Patrick. And thanks for having us here today. This is really great to be a part of this. As Patrick said, I actually do have a background in documentary. I've been at Adobe for 5.5 years now, but before that, I was a motion designer primarily for long-form factual, things like PBS Frontline, lots of mostly hard news kind of documentary. So I've seen a lot of that side of the industry. And that's something that I keep in the back of my mind as we think about building features and as we decide who we're building them for and what they need. So that's a big part of product management too. It's what do users need? We're sort of their advocate. We're your advocate inside of Adobe, and we need to balance that with engineering reality and the rest of the business. Anton, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I think I'm left. So I'm a product marketing manager for video, specifically for the German-speaking market. So I'm kind of the bridge between people like Victoria and Patrick and the apps we are doing, and you all who are using these apps all day long. And it's a brilliant job, because my job is to spend time with you and talk to you, to just what we do and what you need from us to be successful every day. So yeah, really looking forward to spending another hour with you now, and then again over the next couple of days in this fantastic festival.
Before we move on, there are some things to say. Still, there's a chat function you will find at the bottom, and if you have questions, send them in. In the back is Florentina Figershofer, and she's head of DOK.forum, and she will assist with bringing in the audience questions. And the other thing is there's one participant which is like a multi-view of us all. And if you would like to have the best experience, then you have to pin this view of us all. This would be the best way to join and to participate. Well, first of all, probably Anton, Adobe partnered with the DOK.fest. I hope that there are lots of reasons for this. And could you talk a little bit about your engagement?
Yeah, there are indeed some reasons for that. And I believe that what I forgot to mention earlier was I do have another background in filmmaking, not especially documentary, but it's something I've been really interested in over the last couple of years. So I believe, and that's true, that editing really is one of the most important parts in making a film, making a movie, whatever it is, from a small thing on YouTube to a big cinema production. It's just a part where everything comes together, your story, the images you shot, the music you produce, later the effects you add and graphics. So it's really the part where everything comes together to one story. And I think editors really do an amazing job, and we do everything we can to support them in their daily life. But they're not typically the person who gets on a stage and talks about a film. So we really wanted to create this stage, even if it's virtual, this time again, really create this stage to just celebrate good editing and celebrate people who are really brilliant in their job. And for us, just honestly to learn, to just see what's new, what productions are happening right now, how people adapt to working remotely, producing stuff remotely. So it's just a brilliant platform for us to just get in touch with everybody. And I think that's really some reasons we have. And now let's talk about the really important stuff, which is how people can work and use stuff to really make their stuff happen.
When I started out as a small filmmaker, I knew about Adobe, but for me it was kind of this multi-billion big company far, far away. And Patrick was laughing. But yeah, it was not imaginable to get really in touch, and you started something which is called engineering hours, and talking to the user and getting feedback. Could you tell us something about the German part of Adobe, and probably Patrick, that would be a question for you.
Yeah, interesting. I think what you're referring to, most people would phrase as the big faceless corporation syndrome, right? You think of that as being buildings, not people. You think of that being...
That's pretty much true. Because...
Right? You think of that being, stock at the New York Stock Exchange, and not necessarily indeed someone who you can get in touch with and talk about your needs. I always feel sad when that's the notion, because at least within our group, I'm not going to speak for all of Adobe, but I will definitely speak for all of the video group. We're kind of the other way around. We love to be in touch with everyone who wants to get in touch with us and talk about the product, talk about the needs. It's the only way to make the product better. And that's not, that also usually when you say that, people are kind of afraid that might be lip service. But the reality of it, at least that Victoria and I live with the larger teams around us, is that we don't want to fly blind. And we also don't want to assume that we're the geniuses who can actually make everything so well that you just need to look at the product and appreciate it as it is. With something like, companies such as Apple being so dominant in the way we perceive consumer product, there's this notion that something's dropping out of the sky and it will be brilliant. And you know what? With some of the products that they've introduced over the last 20 years, it's easy to see why you can have that idea. But a software product for professionals, such as After Effects, such as Premiere, and certainly, not in our group, but a close sister product, Photoshop, same thing. if we're not looking at the way the product is being actually used, we're not going to make it better, because a large part of a product that's established like these three are, the reality of it is that you need to actually constantly look at what's changing around the product. And in our case, we're certainly going to talk about some of the things here. Production in the last 12 months has changed so dramatically because of remote environments. You got to respond to that. And the solutions for that are not dropping out of the sky. They always come from conversation. They always come from looking at how people are actually deploying the things we work on and how productive they can be with it. Germany team, you asked for that. Got carried away with a big faceless corporation. Germany team, actually, at that point, I might actually switch to speaking German, but with respect to Victoria being A, up early, she's based out of Seattle, and B, not a German-speaking member of the crew. We'll stick with English, but I actually speak German, and I have been working based out of Munich ever since I joined Adobe. Reason for that, simply put, is we actually value having representation in the regions as a company, which means we have a pretty large development crew up in Hamburg. Most of the audio product is actually engineered based out of Hamburg. A good part of the cloud engine is actually produced based out of Hamburg. And then there is a part of the crew that works on Premiere, actually also in Hamburg. The only team, Victoria, come to think of it, that is no footprint in Hamburg right now is After Effects. But
that's not true. We have one QE.
You have one. Okay. All right. Not sure that counts, but all right, you got one. So we also have a crew East Coast and West Coast in the US. We actually have a crew in Noida, and for what it's worth, these days worth mentioning. I feel pretty fortunate that we can do this in the environment we live in, because talking to our friends and colleagues based out of Noida, next to Delhi, if you're watching the news, things can be really grim right now. So I think we can consider ourselves lucky right now that we can still engage in this kind of conversation and look forward.
And you established some kind of feedback loops from the user to build features into. Can you describe what you have in place? Which kind of routines are there?
Victoria, I think you would want to take that one.
Yeah, so there's formal engagements, but there's also informal ones. I think I don't go a single day without talking to at least some After Effects users one-on-one. We'll do everything from user research, testing prototypes, to even just talking to people in the industry, getting to understand what they need, where the industry is going, what's changing right now. Remote production is a big topic, of course. So sometimes it's a very formal. We will engage with you and work on something that meets your needs, but also the needs of users like you. And then other times it's much more casual. In the days before COVID, it would be the go get a beer and talk about the product kind of thing. So there's a big range there, but the important thing is that we're engaging with all kinds of users from different backgrounds pretty much all the time.
Patrick said one of his major tasks is to say no to some proposals. And where do you get those from, those proposals? Are there many users coming to you with those proposals?
That happens constantly, and Patrick can chime in on this as well. We could have an infinite backlog of things we could do. Our user base is so diverse. People are creating so many different kinds of things with our products, and then they're adding other tools on top of our products and building out these very large, complex workflows. There are so many things we could do. And so a big part of our jobs is figuring out where is the most impact, what's the thing we can do that's going to benefit the biggest number of users, that's going to make their workflow easier, save them hours or even days of time. So that's one of the big things we look at, is what's that impact going to be of introducing something, because we could do anything that's on the list, and that list could be miles long.
And where we get that from, just to give you a bit of a perspective towards how broad that conversation can be. So obviously there are one-on-one conversations, and we'll never stop having those. That's very valuable. And that's not just Victoria and myself. That's actually pretty much everyone on the team has that desire. It's just good to be close to people who use the product. You always gain insight beyond the question you're asking. But there is something rather broad, which is a platform that's called Uservoice, which you can actually access if we have users here in the audience and you haven't seen this yet. From the help menu in both products, you can actually straight take a request to that platform. If you have something in mind, please, by all means, go ahead and enter that. You'll actually see, just while you're typing, if that's already on the catalog, so if other people had similar requests, if there are certain buzzwords, like, making this up, you have something that you want to see done differently in track mixing. As soon as you hit track mixing, you'll actually see all the other requests already in the catalog for people discussing track mixing. You might find what you want us to see do already there. If it's new, don't be afraid of entering something new. But once you're there, it's also kind of nice to give a +1 to the things already there that are related to your topic. So that's pretty cool. We obviously can't, as Victoria mentioned, do everything that's on that list, but it gives us pretty good insight in terms of gravity or even groups of things that might relate to a particular area of work where it seems like there is work that we need to do. Then there is enterprise. We do have a pretty big footprint in enterprise in general. And most people, when you say that word, already think of something very specific. Even there, it's broad, right? We have broadcast customers, really big ones, but you will also find really big brands being in that category of enterprise customers. And for those, we're usually trying to find different answers for what it's worth. Extensibility of the product. So we basically create an API rather than actually implementing something in the product. It's a pretty big part of what we do to make sure, as I mentioned, that the product doesn't blow up and just becomes more of a cockpit and gets intimidating. Because another big part of what we need to do is to make sure that people have access, right? Something I'm really big on is participation. If the product becomes hard to learn, that's a problem. If the product is unattainable in general, that's an even bigger problem. If the product is inconsistent, so you basically have to relearn every day what to do, that's probably the worst. So there's a broad canvas that you need to paint on to make sure that there's a good blend of innovation, which we always aim to have with the releases we do, but at the same time to really just keep making it better with the foundation it's got. There's always got to be a balance between those. And, those here probably, if they're joining forums in general, there's always that conversation. Should you spend more time on just performance or more time on making sure that it's the most stable product that's ever been? Or is there indeed something that saves you hours, as Victoria has mentioned? And all of those have value in themselves. So creating that mix and blend is the deal.
Yeah, that leads me kind of to my next question. Who's the product for? Because Premiere was formerly known for more like the aspects of single shooters, and it is now moving kind of professional. And if there are so many requests, how do you value the ones or the others? Or can it be the jack of all trades? Can it be the product for everybody?
No, the answer is it cannot be for everyone. I think that would be pointless if you'd say it's the same interface for every person, no matter what's the intention. You're going to create something that is not ideal for pretty much everyone, right? It's not going to be fast enough for some. It's not going to be deep enough for others. It's going to be way too deep for yet another group of people. So as you already mentioned, it's been moving. It's true. Premiere has actually moved over the last 15 years, I'd say. From mostly being a short form product for a certain amount of detail that you'd want to create with it to a product that can definitely reach absolute the high-end part of the industry. And to that end, I think 4 out of 5 of the nominations for the Oscar for documentary feature this year have actually been cut on Premiere, and that's been consistent for years now. You also see the majority of movies at Sundance cut with Premiere, and there's a reason for it. We've been targeting that. We wanted to reach higher. We wanted to increase the level of professionality you can achieve with it. We also wanted to make sure that the speed at which you can edit with a product, keyboard-driven workflows are essentially a good topic here. Victoria might chime in with what we've been doing with graphics in that area to make it more friendly for high-end work. But at the same time, we want to reach, to a certain degree, people who are at the start of their career. I think it's more like that. Someone who's getting into the professional realm is a better way of describing the spread than saying it's a product that essentially you use if you edit once a year a wedding videographer's work. You're probably not going to engage with a product that is as deep as Premiere. Victoria, I want to chime in from the interop perspective, motion graphics, that side of the house.
Sure, but you actually got me thinking about something else that I really love about Premiere, which is the team has built a model where there's a simple way of doing anything, but then when you're ready to go deeper, you can. And that's true for graphics, that's true for audio, that's true for color, and that's true for editorial. And I really like that model of you just need to put some text and a graphic. You just need some plain text on your video. You can click with the type tool and start typing. But then if you want to go deeper, you can get a motion graphics template. You can build something more elaborate, or you can go over to After Effects and then use either dynamic link or, again, motion graphics templates, MOGRTs for short, to bring things in without even having to render and to go to the full complexity of what you can do in After Effects. And so I really like that there's sort of that gradient inside the app, so you can engage and go deep where you need to, but you don't have to spend a ton of time on setup and on just getting things in place, because that part we can do for you. And that's... So,
we have a question from the audience, and Randy, I will allow you to talk, so please feel free to just ask the question yourself. I hope we can hear you.
Hi, everybody. Here's Randy from Munich. I have a question. We work almost exclusively with Premiere, and I do a lot of sound work and audition, both for our documentary films and also for podcasting and stuff like that. And there's one feature that I wish existed, and it's dynamic linking, but going from audition back to Premiere. So not just sending all the clips from Premiere to audition, but being able to make a change in audition that reflects in real time back in the timeline Premiere. So like if you get a change that comes in last minute, even though your sound, already in the sound mix, but somebody has changed something in the story and you have to, then you might have to start from scratch. Like if you need to add in some scenes. Is it clear what I'm asking?
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is something which is working with Photoshop. Changes in Photoshop will be changes in the timeline within Premiere. Yeah, of course.
Right, with After Effects, that works. We use that all the time as well. And I just, for audition, because we put a lot of effort into our sound mixes. This is something that would be like a game changer for our workflow.
Brilliant. Generally speaking, there are kind of two different type of trends right now in terms of how to approach anything that requires more attention than the generalist editor is going to bring to the game. Yeah. Especially if you have multiple. I take it you have multiple people on the team, and someone is an audio specialist. So as soon as you enter that arena, things get more interesting, because there is a strong tendency these days to still have everything in one space, meaning that we're right now getting most requests to actually get more of the audition depth into Premiere itself versus improving the exchange between Premiere and audition. So what you might see next, speaking of saying no to things, I'm not saying no to what you want to do because I think it's brilliant, but it might end up in terms of the actual user experience being more like that the audio workflows in Premiere will actually pick up some of the depth that you'll find in audition. Still possible that will improve the dynamic link between the two products. You actually absolutely not the first person to ask for it. If you were to look on Uservoice, you'd actually find that request. And we're investigating that route as well. Sometimes it's also possible to have two different approaches to the same issue, right? That's another thing that we always try to keep in mind, that between two different kind of groups, you will find different needs, even though at the surface it seems like everyone wants the same thing. So thanks for the request, absolutely appreciate it. And do click on that item on Uservoice if you get a chance. Also, as you're in Munich,
so you can
as
vote
soon as
it up.
We can have a beer after this COVID thing.
Yeah,
that might be another nice thing to do.
I would just like to add by saying I would love if audition was directly in Premiere, so that you wouldn't never have to leave. I mean, this would also solve that problem, and maybe unless you want to do specifically like podcasting where you don't need the video function, but having that functionality in Premiere would be great. We rarely do any audio, even like editing in Premiere, because it's more clunky with adjusting audio on the timeline than when you can go much deeper in audition. So if there was a way that it would be like another page in Premiere that would be audition, this would be super cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank
you very much. Message received, and probably all of you can vote out this feature on the user voice list. So it probably will be reality. But speaking of features, is there anything especially useful for documentary editors? Because I think this is the broad audience now. It could be this kind of people.
Victoria, why don't you start?
Yeah, there's so many things. The thing I most wish we had when I was working in documentary is motion graphics templates. They're a huge time saver when you have a lot of repetitive graphics, iterative graphics, things like lower thirds and titles where you're reusing the same design. And I have a lot of memories of, at the very last minute, the director of a film I worked on changing the design of the lower thirds and needing to render out 80 or 120 different versions of a graphic and having to change the font size on every single one of them. And the thing that you can do now with templates is, instead of doing that 120 different times, you update the one template, hand the new version to the editor, and they can import that into Premiere and then replace every instance in the timeline without losing customized timing, customized text, customized settings. You can build that whole thing so that that one graphic gets replaced, and something that would take often an entire weekend back then of making changes, rendering them out, handing them off, cutting them in. You can just do that in a couple of minutes now. And that, to me, is a huge, huge game changer for, in particular, graphics workflows for documentary. That's one of my favorites, and it's I'm like jealous of the future of we have that now, because I spent so much time.
I would actually argue it's in the spirit of what Randy just asked for, right? There's this notion of a locked edit, which is something that, Michael, you and I have probably worked in a locked edit environment when we were a bit younger and had better hair. It's been a while. I remember the days, but it's been a while. A locked edit is something that, we should strike that from the vocabulary. It doesn't exist. We keep making changes until the last minute of whatever it is, whether it's feature film, documentary, or nuisance, whatever it is, really, right? Whatever the subject, whatever the form, we keep making changes. And I think that's something where we're constantly adjusting towards how to actually make that possible without compromising the workflow in general. Sometimes it's actually a bad thing to allow it to fiddle with everything at once. You might actually get yourself into the danger zone by doing so. Updating motion graphics, mass updating them with a change that's coming in last minute. And I think we've heard some hilarious stories about, oh my God, the company just has been sold. Now the branding color is actually not aqua blue. It is actually now Ferrari red. Fantastic. Change all of the work that you've just done for your brand campaign. And you got 1,000 graphics in your project, and you're supposed to deliver in 3 hours. Oh, that's interesting. Those things are actually easily possible now. I would shy away from saying that you would want everything to be flexible, but as soon as you can lock it down and keep everything else still going, I think that's kind of the scenario that we all want to live in. That you take control. I think control is the word that I've been looking for while talking about this, that you're still in charge, right? It shouldn't feel like everything can blow up in smoke, because everything's still going. But as soon as you need to go in, you should have a really precision a precision tool to do that, and not necessarily invent something in order to get that done, or indeed spend the weekend, which I think is the part that everybody on the call might be intimately familiar with. We all have been there.
There's an echo. No, that's gone. There's one feature which is especially interesting to documentary filmmaking, which is speech to text, and this is something you announced last year or something, and I would like to know if it's available in German, and how does it work? Because this seems to offer a lot of versatility instead of transcribing stuff and having this awful lot of work for putting it onto paper.
Yeah, true that. So indeed, that's been available as a public beta, I think since October last year. We're mostly putting this through public beta. And by the way, if you're not aware of the beta program just yet, every Creative Cloud customer has access to the beta versions of the products. We refresh them pretty much daily. And it's one of the ways that we're making sure that the quality of the product constantly goes up. And if we do new things like speech to text, that we kind of harden it against real world usage before putting it into the product. We have speech to text available by application still, for what it's worth, so you wouldn't find that particular feature, but pretty much everything else we're working on. Why is speech to text so different? Why do we keep it as long as we do in beta? Pretty much because we have two goals there. For one thing, the accuracy has to be really, really high. Those who have been using Premiere for a long time actually would remember that we once had something similar, something like 10 years ago. We actually had kind of the predecessor of the technology used today. And the trouble is, it just didn't work well enough. So you went in and had to make corrections as much as made you go beyond the time frame that was required to do it manually altogether. So if you spend more time correcting what's been detected by technology, it's useless, right? Yeah, we're now at the level of where the accuracy is so great that just for understanding the spoken word in your dialogue, you wouldn't need to go in and change anything. If you wanted to use it, like we're combining that workflow with captions right now, if you wanted to use it to print captions, we find actually the feedback from the users on the beta today that it's already better than what you get by most services you can get if you just have other people do it for you. And then, by the way, everyone who's been doing that, we all know that we still go in and sometimes tweak a little and twist a little and also make sure it flows nicely with the actual flow of the story. So there's still something that you want to pay attention to, but that's kind of the fine-tuning bits and pieces that are left. So we kept it for a long time in beta already to make sure that the quality goes up. But the second goal was to make sure it's not an American feature. as this is a DOK festival in Germany, worth mentioning, that we want to make sure that it's available in lots of languages. So we've been adding languages over the last couple of months. German, for what it's worth, is definitely available at this point for beta tests. I think the next thing you're going to ask is, so when is it going to be available? We're getting really close. We're getting close. As the feedback is fantastic. It's certainly useful enough as is. We'll keep making it better. But why is it so different compared to 10 years ago is also an interesting question. Because I've been a skeptic about this, quite frankly, as it didn't work for so long. The advent of artificial intelligence really has made the step change there. The fact that the algorithm is getting better just by feeding it more to work with. So the more we use it, the better it gets. That is something quite fantastic. We've seen that with other features in the last 2 to 3 years that really make a difference. Speaking of participation, if you can do something that otherwise would take weeks to learn in terms of skill set, Victoria, probably throwing this to you for RotoBrush, that would be an interesting one. So give me another 10 seconds and I'll wrap up my part. The thing is, this is a quite exciting thing, speech to text. You can still apply. We can probably send a link. I'm sure, Anton, you have that inside. But yeah, not to worry, it will be in the product in the not too distant future.
But it won't be something which is taking place within my machine. It will be something which is sent out and computed there and coming back. And then there are concerns about confidentiality. If some guys are talking about really hard stuff and so on. How do you work with these concerns?
We're actually currently evaluating both, using a service in the cloud as much as trying to do this locally, which is harder, but in some cases might be preferable. And we haven't actually made the final call on that. So, but as right now, if you were to test drive the beta, it is running in the cloud. We're obviously concerned with security. We've got to be. Right? I mean, generally speaking, I'm sure everyone who's working on anything that is seriously debating the state of the world we live in, you've got to be concerned about fakes. You've got to be concerned about keeping your data secure and for what is worth, protecting others' privacy, right? That's a very important part of the puzzle. So yes, it is actually not saved anywhere. It's analyzed, the results coming back, but we even keep it short on the data that's required. For what it's worth, if you have an hour worth of material and you want to get the transcript, we're, for one thing, never sending a single pixel because it's not necessary. So the first thing really in anything that wants to be serious about security and privacy is to make sure you limit the amount of data you look at so it only serves the task at hand. So for transcription, clearly, we don't need the video. Plus, that also saves a lot of bandwidth, so it saves you money and it goes faster, right? There's a lot of reasons why we wouldn't want anything but the audio. The audio itself is also, as I said, never stored. It is sent, processed, and then it doesn't stay anyplace. It is uniquely yours. As with every technology, there is always, in theory, an opportunity as soon as it's sent someplace that somebody's watching. So it's still really good to make sure that you're on secure connections. It's still really good to make sure that if there is the slightest concern that if anybody would see this, it would be a catastrophe, don't use that kind of feature. I would still be adamant about that. But for everybody else, we're working very hard to make it secure.
We would have another question. I would just pitch that in. Which also brings me to a question I had in mind. A second. Ursula is asking that after her last update to Premiere Pro 2021, the personal shortcuts were gone and it seemed to be impossible to import them. So she's sticking to a former version. Is it actually possible to import them? And then generally, why are there so many updates of Adobe Premiere Pro? Could you answer that maybe? Thank you.
Absolutely. So as far as importing shortcuts, would love to have somebody else on the call who's actually been looking at that just the other day. Generally speaking, with any major version rollover, some things need to actually switch to the new version because they install into a different directory. Should never lead to losing access to shortcuts, should never lead to losing any of your preferences. You actually typically specifically ask whether or not you want to start fresh or translate that into the new version. For what it's worth, I'm easy enough to find on LinkedIn. Would love to dig in and see what actually is the problem. It really shouldn't be like that. So apologies for that experience. In general, why do we do a lot of updates? Well, you kind of have two ways of making sure that the quality is great. You either keep waiting and keep waiting and keep waiting, and that's kind of how it's been for the longest time in software development. And then you realize, oh my God, there's still something that we didn't see. But you changed a million things between two updates. If you do an annual cycle, the risk of that annual release being a really terrible release is actually fantastically high. So the reason why we do a lot of updates is to make it smaller in package size, to make it small in terms of the things that change. And quite frankly, I also think it's great because you get less per release that you need to look at in terms of, is there value in using it? Is there a change that potentially to my current pipeline actually represents a problem? Sometimes we need to adhere to changes in the outside world. Like a lot of people would remember that when Apple moved away from QuickTime, eventually we had to as well. But if you're still in a pipeline that is using a particular format that you can't have on a newer version, then obviously it's worth paying attention to. But the smaller the increments we make, the easier it is to see those changes and to manage them and to appreciate them too, quite frankly. Victoria, anything to add from your perspective?
The other thing to mention here is that our beta actually updates every day. And so if you're trying out a public beta and you find a bug and you let us know, there's a chance we can even have it fixed the very next day. And so that responsiveness, that ability to get something to you if you're blocked, I think that piece is really important too. And the monthly releases is more about doing that on a larger scale, but not everybody wants to update every single day, obviously. So we're not expecting everyone to want to do that. And we've also separated out the beta releases so you can have them sitting in parallel next to your release build. You can have both on your machine. The project files are compatible. You can move back and forth, try out a new feature, try out a fix if you run into a bug, and then you can go back to the release build to keep working. So that's part of what we're trying to do is give people access to fixes they need really quickly.
Maybe. If not, I'm happy to just take the question coming in from Dietmar, who just asked if it's possible to use speech to text offline too without sending anything to the internet. I think, Patrick, you took this earlier when you said that's something to consider, but just not. Yeah.
Now there is value in having both options at the end of the day, right? But doing it locally obviously eliminates the security concern for one thing. And it also, depending on where you're at, speaking of documentary work, if you're somewhere really remote, but you still would want to get that transcript to get going, then there's another big benefit in not having to deal with bandwidth and connectivity issues like apparently we're doing with the audio piece to this conversation right now. So yes, absolutely, point well taken. As I said, there are some technical challenges with that. It turns out this is one of the things easier to do in the cloud for what it's worth, but doesn't mean we're not engaging the conversation to see if we can make it a local experience.
Yeah,
I'll actually go for an extension as we got the time to the question that Michael has raised earlier. There's something that specifically for documentary filmmaker is something that we've done in the last couple of years that, you know, I hate the word game changer. It always sounds so big, but probably the thing I'm going to mention is if you haven't looked at what's called productions, then I would encourage you to do so if you're on Premiere. What is it? So let's start with the problem statement. If you work on something that is massive, then easy enough to see with all of that being stored in an XML file. At one point that gets pretty big. Big files tend to take some time to parse and open. If they are corrupted, then you're going to lose a lot of work. Backing that up all the time is not necessarily the best option. So we've clearly looked at how to improve workflows in terms of opening files faster, to get access to the media that you need to be working with pretty much immediately. And so the solution to that was what's called productions. What is it really? It's actually breaking down your production, hence the name, into as many smaller projects as you'd like, but they're still managed within one environment. So think of pretty much every scene, if you want to go to the extreme, could be described as a project. And therefore, as you enter that, it will open that and will reference the media and you start working with it. But that makes it a very immediate experience. It will also save the changes to that very specific project within that production. So it's small, it's agile. You can very easily get into a really big production with almost infinite number of assets and still have a very snappy editing experience. If you're not using it yet, can only recommend doing so. It's brilliant also if you need to look at a media archive. That's where it actually really shines. If you need to reference older projects with your current work, if you're looking back, like work that you've done 2-3 years ago, and the current work is actually referencing some of that. No need to import any of that. You just need to reference that older project in your production. And you can gain access to it and then kind of flip a couple of scenes, a couple of references from it, and put that into your new work. So it's a really, really great way of organizing work and gaining speed and efficiency. And for what it's worth, safety, as indeed, as soon as you have dozens, or if in doubt, if you go to immediate complexity, if you have 100 different smaller projects in one production, you can hardly go wrong with that. It will not break your workflow ever. So it's a good safety net, but also great for productivity.
And that's a good thing to talk about, this kind of collaboration and remote collaboration, because everybody needs it right now, and production seems to be a solution. I talked to Agatha, where she's editor of the nominated film Instruction for Survival, and she told me that after she made changes to her film, she had to render it out and send it to via WeTransfer or so to the director, get notes, written notes, and then coming back. And I thought, well, this sounds like 2010 or 5, but it doesn't sound like today. And what kind of is production the solution to this? And are there any more tools to help with this situation where editors don't necessarily live near their directors?
Yeah, cool. Great. Oh my God, that's the rest of the conversation easily, because we can talk about this for hours. Let's start with productions are really built for teams that collaborate locally, or for individuals that need to compartmentalize work, right? In the documentary case, we usually see one person using productions, just, you working with yourself almost. Yeah. So it has really these two different kind of needs it's serving. The need to get to smaller pieces within your production pipeline. And indeed, as you're working on one thing, somebody else can work on another. This is where the collaboration comes into view. Now, doing this remotely, it certainly can be done with productions. When we have a couple of customers who have been doing that pretty much the day COVID made people close offices. It's doable. It comes with a couple of caveats, because you need to really think a bit about where to place the media and how to make it accessible. Usually proxies are being used for that. So a lot of folks I know have actually put the proxies in the cloud, and all of the people working on the same project have been referencing the media in the cloud. And once you get to the final, not the locked edit version, we know it's never final, the final _final_ really final version 13. Right, that thing that you're eventually going to present to the audience.
I do exactly know what you're meaning.
Right, in one place with high-res media locally. So there are some interesting ways there, but it always feels a bit like a workaround because it hasn't been designed with the cloud in mind. The two other ways of solving the problem are certainly to use what's called team projects. That's actually specifically designed to have multiple people as a team work on one production. That's already a cloud-based environment. So if you're in a scenario where that doesn't work for whatever reason, then that's already no longer really an option. For more and more people, it's interesting to see this throughout COVID, and Victoria and I had a chat about this the other day. It's kind of interesting how many people who said we're never going to do anything with the cloud. And now there's this forcing function. Well, how do you collaborate across continents at times? Or just, one office in my home office in Munich, your home office in Munich. There's not much water in between. There's still at least the imaginary ocean in terms of, we can't work together. We have to find a way to get actually the media to exchange and to have the project data to be shared. There's something about this scenario that makes us rethink what the cloud means and how to make it secure. I mean, that still stays on top of the conversation. But at the end of the day, there's a third thing, which we've seen, especially with enterprise, which is the VDI solution, right? The virtualized desktop. So you basically have neither media nor the product anywhere near you. All you have is an access point, which can be a really low-powered machine from, the day you mentioned, it can be from 2005, Michael. Machine from 2005 with some sort of internet access can let you edit 4K, 4 streams of 4K if you'd like, with a ton of audio on top of it, with motion graphics and everything else, and it will render real time because it's done having the backend in the cloud. But that's very cost intense. I don't think that's the future, by the way. I think we'll have hybrid
for documentary filmmaking. If it's costly,
it's crazy, right? Just the cost is very prohibitive for it. But it's interesting to see that also 2 to 3 years ago, that was really a niche. Right now, that part of the business where people do that, that's exploding. We have a couple of really high-end broadcast customers who basically have the entire studio system now basically centralized on virtual deployment. Fantastic that it exists, but I think the future will look a little different. It's more a combination of what I described between what we've got with the local productions and something that organizes that, orchestrates that in the cloud. And we keep investing in that. We got team projects as is. It has really beautiful management of versions. It has management of conflicts. If 2 people accidentally go into the same part of the project, it has a lot of what's required to make that work. But we've seen the limits of it through COVID, clearly, right? There's lots more that we can do.
For me, it still sounds kind of complicated. And when I think about documentary filmmaking, it's often like companies consisting of 1 or 2 persons doing 1 film a year, and also not having too much money to spend, and so I probably think we have for documentary filmmakers, we have to look for a obtainable solution which is easily accessible for somebody not in this big production environment you're naming. So we're looking forward to get some more possibilities for collaborations, and I think I think this is the future because now it's like, well, it was normal and there was a need of being together, and the new thing is not being together and having editors abroad or somewhere else, and this will be the new normal because it's not about being there, it's about working together. And so I think this is the most important trend after COVID. Fueled by this pandemic, but it's to stay. It will be here for forever, I think, from now on. And do you have some more in the pipeline for those smaller and more easily accessible?
That's actually where we're focused. The work moving forward will actually not focus on helping those who already have the solution, as you mentioned, who can afford the costly version of a cloud-based production environment today. We can make that a little better, and I think we will. But the real opportunity is with exactly the scenarios you just described, where it needs to be both easy enough to use and accessible, and it needs to cover, yet again, the concern of, is this secure? Can I trust this environment that puts something between me, the work, and the other person I'm working with? Can I trust that system? Is that an environment that's worth using? And is it actually, at the end of the day, that's got to be our aim. Is it actually better? Is it safer than keeping the media local? That's got to be the story in the next couple of years. And I agree with you. This is not going to be a COVID limitation. I don't think we'll all go back to our office and say, well, jolly nice that we found out that there is another way. I think the appetite is there at this point. And clearly, it also opens up other opportunities that I think are great. You can work with people independent of their location. So you get the best talent, not the person who's available in town. That sounds great to me.
Well, probably what's quite interesting, what will the future bring? We saw competitors coming into the realm of professional editing and leaving it. And because I know like editors are not the YouTuber ones, but I'd say the documentary editors are more on the conservative side. So I don't want to invest, not the money, but brains into a product which will disappear or not support me in my professional development. So question here is, Adobe is now becoming big in this professional filmmaking world, and is Adobe here to stay?
Victoria, you're smiling. Go for it.
I think just thinking about the fact that we're working on apps that have been around for almost 30 years, it's pretty clear that we're in here for the long haul. And just that long legacy going forward, we have professional workflows are in our DNA and in the DNA of these products. And that's something that we take very seriously. And we've had so many conversations lately, last few weeks, around how people adopt changes in their workflow, when people are willing to change. And the biggest thing we find is if there's something that's really valuable, that's really going to save you time, that's going to make things easier and simpler, to reduce the cognitive load of using the tool so you can focus on your work. And so that's really the stuff that we want to focus on going forward.
Thank you. Well, this will be the last chance for the audience to ask for features, but now the questions to Patrick as the principal product manager video. Is there anything, is there a roadmap? Is there anything you can talk about? What kind of features we have to expect from Adobe Premiere in the future, in the near future? Can you talk about those?
Sure. As usual, as things may change, I take it with the caveat of not a guarantee that you'll see this tomorrow or next month or even still this year. Some things will take longer, but the speech-to-text avenue is very interesting to us. We're already seeing a plethora of great ideas as to what to build beyond having the transcript. I'll give you an idea. Search is very interesting as soon as you've got the transcript. It also might be actually pretty cool to say, well, I'll start actually putting pieces together based on what I've got from the transcript, not necessarily going just with the visuals. There's an enormous range of conversation right now that has us interested in seeing what else we can do now that the core technology is established. The other thing that's almost guaranteed to drop more crazy cool features is indeed the AI that's underneath speech to text, but many other features. So whenever we see a chance to give access to a tool that otherwise is too complicated, oh, I think my kids are coming in.
Hello.
My co-pilot is here. Lovely. Victoria, as I'm a bit distracted, why don't you take the rest of that?
Oh, no, it's always great to have a special guest at a live stream. But I think there is a lot that is promising on the research side. And we actually have a big internal research org. It's where things like Rotobrush 2, which has been a lot of fun to see what people have done with that in After Effects, have come from a AI-driven rotoscoping. Making things that wouldn't even be possible as part of your workflow when you're on a tight deadline previously. If you had to do that frame by frame, it might be days or weeks of work. Making it a reality that, okay, I can cut this out of this video. That opens up new creative possibilities than what you can do with that footage. And I think we're going to see the knock-on effects of not just the AI tech itself, but what it enables. But it's also, for us, a lot of it's about performance. A lot of it's about making sure that there's a rock solid foundation in place. So one of the big things we've been focused on for After Effects is multi-frame rendering. Really using the complete power of your machine in order to process your graphics. And that's something that's in public beta now. And so you can get a peek at where that's going. We've been really open about the roadmap there. We're doing a lot of engagement with users who are testing on thousands of different machines, giving us results. We're using that to tune what we're doing. So we're really hoping to have more of that kind of a model for development going forward. And the public beta gives us the ability to do that. So stay tuned to the beta. There's a lot of things coming in there. And Patrick, I think if you want to wrap up after that.
I think one more thing that's pretty exciting is documentary filmmakers have a tendency to like the Mac better than Windows. We're definitely working full steam on getting the M1 platform to deliver on the promise of both excellent performance, but also crazy battery life. And for what it's worth, I've had the 13-inch now for a couple of weeks, and it is quite unbelievable how much you can push a product like Premiere on it. Public beta available once more. If you have a machine available and you want to test drive, I highly encourage you to do so. It is fascinating to see how speedy it is, but also that the battery just never wants to go down. That's something that I've been looking forward to for some time, that we finally get to machines that don't need power every 30 minutes, but you can actually be on the go and do something. Now, right now you might say we're all at home, but let's look forward to the day that we can all appreciate having a laptop with us someplace else but home and get some work done. It's quite fantastic. So expect a release for that for Premiere in the not too distant future. And indeed, After Effects is working on a native M1 version as well. Performance gains both sides. That's pretty exciting.
So I'd say, knowing my fellow, well, I'm not a documentary editor, but knowing those and speaking to them, then stability is the most highly valued thing, because if the machine crashes, that's pretty bad, and then it takes probably not hours, but it's really bad in the workflow. And if you're doing occasionally editing work, it doesn't mean so much. But if you're working with clients, if you're working with your director, this is something which is very important. And do you have a special system in place to make sure then when you roll out a new version, this is
one pretty interesting system here is indeed to not give you dates. That's precisely why I'm not telling you. We will have the M1 support on June 15th. We might be working towards a date, but committing to a date is a crime in modern software development, because you got basically 3 opportunities to change something. You can either get more people to work on something, or you can change the quality of that thing you're working on, or you change the date. Well, I cannot magically produce more people. I don't want to change the quality. It can't be lower as great. So the date has to be flexible, right? That's precisely whenever people say, why don't you give us exactly the date for this or that? Or why does the roadmap publicly show a commitment to June, July, August? That's why. That's the biggest lever we've got to make sure that the quality is as good as it can be to release when it's actually ready. It's also the reason why we're going through public beta so openly. Companies like Adobe, speaking of we started with that, right? The big faceless corporation has a tendency to say, we're not going to tell you anything about what's coming next. We've been very open about what's coming next, because I actually don't care if a competitor sees that. I only care about making it as good as we can.
Oh, that's a wonderful statement.
Yeah, thank you. I think we're like 1 hour in our session, and if
really?
That's
amazing.
The time went by really fast, I would say. I don't know if there are still questions from the audience. Please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm very sure we can still answer them. So
later on or now, is it? There's.
It's 6 now, so
no. So we're closing it. So thank you so much for joining here. Thank you, Patrick, Victoria, and Anton, and thank you, the audience, for being part of this. And we will have tomorrow. We will have Jeppe Botskov the name is difficult. He's editor on the President nominated film, and we will have a Q&A with him tomorrow. So please join. And next week we'll have Carla Gutierrez, Emmy nominated editor, with us, and a panel about truth in the images. In documentary film making, and other talks with editors. So I'm very much looking forward to see you again, and we keep in contact, Joe, Patrick, and Anton, and see you soon.